What really happens inside an avoidant when the super empath finally stops trying to fix things, when the silence they once craved actually arrives? It's a question most people never see the answer to, because on the surface the avoidant looks perfectly fine, detached, calm, unbothered. But that's just what you see. Inside, something far more complex begins to unfold. Avoidants are wired to protect themselves from emotional overwhelm. They run, not because they don't care, but because closeness awakens parts of them they never learned to handle. So when they pull away, they expect the same old pattern to repeat. You reach out, you fix, you explain, you soften the silence. It keeps them in control, safely distant, yet still emotionally fed. But when the super empath doesn't chase this time, when there are no long messages, no explanations, no gentle efforts to restore the bond, the avoidance system starts to panic in quiet, invisible ways. At first, they tell themselves they're relieved. This is what I wanted: freedom, space, peace. But the peace doesn't feel peaceful for long, because what they called freedom was never about being free from you, it was about being free from emotional pressure. And now that pressure is gone, there's nothing left to distract them from themselves. The silence that once gave them comfort now starts to sound like an unanswered question. They begin replaying moments in their head, not to reconnect, but to reassure themselves that they still hold emotional power. But this time, there's no response, no signal, no emotional feedback. And that's when something subtle but powerful happens. Their illusion of control begins to tremble. The avoidant starts to feel the absence, not just of your voice, but of the emotional grounding you once provided. They never realized how much your steady energy balanced their chaos. Without it, they feel slightly off, disoriented, restless, and strangely aware that something is missing. They'll try to suppress it, they'll distract themselves, convince their mind they're fine, but their nervous system knows the truth. It starts to seek the very emotional safety they once rejected. Because when the super empath stops fixing things, the avoidant no longer has anyone to regulate their emotions for them. They're left alone with the feelings they've spent a lifetime avoiding, and for the first time, they have to face what they always ran from. The silence isn't peace, it's exposure, and that's where the real unraveling begins. In this video, we'll explore exactly what unfolds inside the avoidant's mind, the 5 deep emotional stages they go through when the one person who always fixed everything finally stops trying. The illusion collapses. How did this happen? For the avoidant, this moment comes as a shock. They always believed that no matter how much distance or silence appeared, the other person would always come back. In their mind there was an unspoken rule: you fix things. The avoidant creates distance, and that rule was so deeply wired that they never imagined one day that pattern could actually break. When you stop, when you no longer message, explain, or chase, at first the avoidant feels a strange sense of confidence. They tell themselves, "See, I finally got the space I wanted." They celebrate their freedom in their own way. They sleep longer, dive into their routine, spend time with friends, act like everything's fine. But somewhere deep inside, a tiny doubt begins to whisper, why is it so quiet? Are they really moving on? That doubt is instantly dismissed, because the first rule of an avoidant mind is don't feel, just rationalize. So they wrap emotions in logic, saying things like, they probably need some time, I deserve space too, I'm fine. But as the days pass, the silence starts to sink in, not outside, but inside. They pick up the phone, see your name, but don't text. Their ego says, wait, they'll reach out first. But another voice inside whispers, what if they never do? And that's where the illusion begins to collapse. The avoidant always believed they had control, that they could choose when to pull away and when to return. But now, when you don't come back, that control turns against them. They start realizing that the power was never really theirs, it was your consistency that made them feel powerful. Now the silence becomes a mirror, and they can't stand what it's showing them. On the outside, the avoidant looks calm. They stay active on social media, appear normal, maybe even post something that says, I'm doing great. But inside, their system is in chaos. Their nervous system is in a constant state of threat, a subtle panic caused by the emptiness where your presence used to be. They get irritated by small things, lose sleep, and drift into their thoughts, fighting the very emotions they once ran from. And this is the moment that tests you, because this is when the temptation hits hardest, to reach out, to explain, to fix things. But this is exactly when you must not. If you go back now, the avoidant will slip right back into their old comfort zone, and that illusion of control will rebuild itself again. Let them stay in the silence. Let them feel that your absence isn't a punishment, it's a mirror reflecting their dependency, their control, and their emotional fragility. They won't change until they truly feel the pain of that illusion collapsing, and when that pain finally hits, the avoidant will for the first time ask themselves, how did this happen? And how long can I keep running from it? The ego panic, how can they live without me? After the first shock fades, something deeper begins to rattle inside the avoidant, their ego. This isn't about missing love, it's about missing power. For the first time, the avoidant senses that they were never as detached as they pretended to be. They realize that your efforts, your texts, your reassurance, your calm after every storm were quiet confirmations of their worth. Every time you tried to fix things, it whispered to their subconscious, you still matter, and now that whisper is gone, no validation, no proof, no chase, that's when the panic begins. It's not the kind of panic you see, it's the one that simmers under the surface, disguised as irritation, restlessness, or sudden mood shifts. They start asking themselves questions they can't even admit out loud. If they're not reaching out, does that mean I don't matter anymore? Were they stronger than I thought? Have I lost my grip on them? For someone who built their safety on control, this feeling is unbearable. The ego doesn't crave connection, it craves confirmation. And when the source of that confirmation disappears, it feels like an identity crisis. The avoidant begins to feel small, unanchored, almost invisible. On the outside though, they play the opposite game. They try harder to look unfazed, they post more, they show up online. They might even suddenly start doing things that seem out of character, flirting, reconnecting with old friends, acting busy, or showing signs of sudden happiness. But it's not joy, it's performance. Every story, every visible "I'm fine" moment is secretly aimed at you, a silent test to see if you'll react. Because if you react, the panic eases. It tells their ego, I still have an effect, I still matter. But when you don't respond, the silence becomes unbearable again. They refresh, they wait, they check if you've seen something, but you don't move. And in that stillness, the avoidance inner dialogue turns darker. Maybe they don't need me anymore. Maybe I was never that important. That thought, not being needed, is what truly terrifies them. It threatens the very structure of their defense system, because their distance always relied on the belief that you'd stay close enough to chase. And this is where your strength matters the most, because their panic will try to pull you back in, through subtle tests, emotional bait, or sudden half-hearted contact. They might act cold one moment, curious the next. They'll do anything to provoke a response, just to feel in control again. But this is not the time to soften. Your silence now isn't cruelty, it's clarity. You're teaching them something they've avoided all their life, that worth is not measured by how much someone chases them, and connection isn't control. So stay still, stay grounded. Because when the avoidance ego finally realizes it can't survive on being chased, that's when their real transformation quietly begins. The void begins to echo, it feels empty inside. After the ego's noise fades, something quieter and far more haunting begins to take over. The silence they once wanted now stretches too wide, too deep. It doesn't feel peaceful anymore, it feels hollow. Every moment that used to feel like freedom now feels like emptiness echoing inside them. The distractions that once worked, the music, the scrolling, the casual conversations, lose their flavor. The world seems distant, colorless, slow, because the truth is, it wasn't freedom they were craving, it was relief, and relief, without emotional connection, quickly turns into numbness. Avoidants have spent their whole lives trying to outrun emotional discomfort. But now, in the absence of your presence, your grounding, your emotional rhythm, they're left alone with the very feelings they've always suppressed. They don't know how to process it. They don't even have words for it, so their system starts to shut down. They go quiet, not because they're calm, but because their nervous system is trying to protect them from the ache they don't understand. Inside, it's not just sadness, it's disorientation. It's the loss of emotional gravity, that steady pull they once got from you without even realizing it. And on the outside, they look distant, robotic even. They'll move through their days like everything's fine, working, socializing, keeping up appearances, but something about their energy shifts. It's like their spark dims. They may start avoiding deep conversations, sleeping irregularly, or spending more time alone, not out of peace, but because the silence has become too loud. Sometimes, they'll even seek new distractions, new people, new routines, anything that can temporarily fill the void you once balanced for them. But no matter what they try, nothing really sticks, because what's missing isn't excitement, it's emotional grounding. And grounding doesn't come from new faces or temporary highs, it came from the emotional safety you represented. Now their inner dialogue becomes heavier. They start to wonder, why does everything feel so dull? They may not say your name or admit what's really missing, but deep down they know something inside them has gone quiet in a painful way. It's the kind of silence that doesn't soothe, it echoes. Every thought they try to push away bounces back louder. Every ignored emotion demands attention, and slowly, that emotional numbness begins to turn into self-questioning. This is the stage where you must resist the urge to step back in, because the moment you try to comfort them again, that echo dies, and with it, the lesson their heart needs most. Let them sit in that stillness, let them feel the emptiness they used to run from, because only when that void becomes unbearable, will the avoidant begin to understand what connection truly meant. They called it space, but now that space has turned into a mirror, and in that mirror, they're finally meeting the part of themselves they've avoided their entire life. The shame awakens. Maybe I was the one who ruined it. When the emptiness grows too heavy to ignore, something deeper begins to stir. Shame, not the kind that comes from being caught or judged, but the kind that quietly crawls up when the mind finally stops running. This is the moment the avoidant starts to see the truth they've spent their whole life avoiding. They remember every time you reached out with softness, and they pushed you away. Every time you tried to understand, and they shut down. Every time you offered safety, and they mistook it for threat. And suddenly the story they've been telling themselves, that they were the calm, rational one, and you were too emotional, starts to fall apart. Inside, a slow ache begins to rise, because deep down they realize you weren't trying to control them, you were trying to connect with them. You weren't starting fights, you were asking to be seen, and instead of leaning closer, they ran. They start replaying moments they once dismissed, the messages they ignored, the warmth they took for granted. Each memory now lands differently. Where they once felt irritation, they now feel guilt, because what they called peace was actually your effort, holding everything together. This is where their internal world becomes heavy. Their mind keeps whispering, maybe I was wrong, but their ego fights back. No, you did what you had to do. It's an internal war between pride and regret, and that war shows up on the outside in strange ways. They might appear quieter than usual, not in control this time, but uncertain, uncomfortable in their own skin. They may start reminiscing, revisiting old chats or places, scrolling through memories not because they miss the past, but because they're trying to understand how it slipped away. Some avoidants even start self-sabotaging more, overworking, isolating, or pretending they don't care, because facing shame feels worse than being alone. You might notice them testing small openings, liking an old post, watching your stories, sending a vague message that doesn't really say anything. It's not a full step back, it's a hesitant tap on the door of what they broke. But even in those small actions, the fear is clear. What if I'm too late? What if they finally saw through me? That question haunts them quietly, because shame doesn't scream, it lingers. And this is exactly where your power lies, not in responding, not in soothing, but in allowing the silence to stay long enough for that shame to do its work. Because shame, when faced instead of fixed, becomes awareness, and awareness is the only doorway to change. If you rush to make them feel better now, they'll rebuild the same emotional wall and hide behind it again. But if you stay still, if you don't rush to ease their guilt, they'll have to sit with the truth that they destroyed the very place that once made them feel safe. And in that real agencies, the avoidant begins to see the one thing they've always run from, not your love, but their own reflection in it. At last, everything turns upside down. The one who once ran from connection now drowns in its memories. The avoidant, who used to find comfort in silence, now finds it unbearable. He used to believe peace came from distance, from shutting doors and turning cold. But now, that same stillness feels like a punishment carved in time, because everywhere he turns, there's an echo of your voice, your calm, your absence. He tries to distract himself, scrolling endlessly, diving into work, pretending life hasn't shifted, but nothing holds his focus. Moments that used to feel like control now sting with regret. Even laughter feels forced, music feels empty, and nights feel longer than ever. Inside him, thoughts keep looping. What if I hadn't pulled away? What if I had stayed? He replays every conversation, every time you reached out and he froze. Now he's the one who waits, for a message that doesn't come, for a feeling that doesn't fade. On the outside, he looks steady, maybe even fine. People around him don't see the storm that started inside. He still wears that calm, distant face, the one that once fooled even you. But now, it's just a disguise for restlessness, because deep within he feels the shift, a heaviness that no silence can soothe. He checks his phone when no one's looking, scrolls through your old chats, types a message and deletes it. He tells himself it's over, yet every thought betrays that lie. This is the emotional reversal, the quiet collapse of everything he built to protect himself. He realizes too late that peace wasn't in the distance, it was in your presence. You weren't the noise he needed to escape, you were the calm beneath it. And now he's left with an emptiness he can't name, a longing he can't undo, because when the running stops, reflection begins, and reflection always hurts more than silence. So when this shift happens, don't reach back. Let him sit in that discomfort, because that's where awareness is born. This is not your time to explain, chase or soften the edges of his realization. This is the moment where your stillness teaches louder than words ever could. Because now the same silence he once used to escape you, is the silence that keeps bringing him back to you, in thought, in memory, in regret. He may never say it out loud, but deep down he knows, it was never peace he wanted to protect, it was love he was too afraid to keep. So here's the truth, when the super empath finally stops trying, the avoidant isn't just left with silence, they're left facing themselves. All the distance, all the walls, all the cool detachment they leaned on suddenly become mirrors, reflecting the emotions they spent a lifetime avoiding. The peace they once sought in separation turns into emptiness, restlessness, and a quiet awareness of what they've lost. This is the emotional reversal, the moment they realize that control was never theirs, that calm, detached exterior. It's just a mask hiding the panic, the guilt, and the longing that's always been there just beneath the surface. They start replaying moments, questioning their choices, and confronting feelings they can no longer escape. And here's the key, this shift doesn't happen while you're chasing or fixing. It only happens when you step back, stay grounded, and allow the silence to do its work. For you, the lesson is simple but powerful. Stop trying to make them see, feel, or change. Your presence is not measured by how much they notice it in the moment, it's measured by the absence they can't ignore. Stay steady, live your life fully, and resist the urge to step back in too soon. Their reflection, their awareness, and their eventual shift will only come when they face the emptiness they once ran from. Remember, this isn't about punishment, it's about clarity, growth, and breaking old patterns. Let them feel the consequences of their own avoidance. Let the silence teach the lesson words never could. Because when they finally confront what they lost, that's when real change and real connection becomes possible.